As I pulled onto the open road, the wind withing through my hair, I couldn't help but feel a sense of exhilaration. My name is Emily, and I had finally done it. I had left my small hometown and embarked on a solo road trip across the country. I was tired of playing it safe and living a mundane life, so I decided to seek adventure and independence on this journey. The sun was setting as I drove along the desolate highway, the colors of the sky melting together into a breathtaking painting. The radio was my only companion, occasionally interrupted by the hum of my car's engine. Just as I was losing myself in the beauty of the landscape, I noticed a figure standing by the side of the road, his thumb outstretched. He looked tired, a little disheveled, but there was something magnetic about him. I hesitated for a moment, aware of the potential danger of picking up a stranger, but something inside me whispered that this was the kind of adventure I had been seeking, and I couldn't let it pass me by. So I slowed down and pulled over, rolling down the passenger side window. "Hey there," I called out to him. "You need a ride?" He flashed me a grateful smile. It seemed to light up his whole face. "Yeah, that would be amazing." "Thanks," he replied as he climbed into the car. I took a closer look at him. He was quite handsome with piercing blue eyes and a chiseled jawline. His charm was undeniable. "I'm Emily," I said, extending my hand. "David," he replied, shaking my hand firmly. "Nice to meet you. We hit it off right away." As we drove, David regaled me with stories of his own travels, filled with fascinating details that painted vivid pictures in my mind. I couldn't help but be drawn to his charismatic nature. As the day turned to night, we decided to stop at a motel to rest. We checked in and agreed to reconvene in the morning to continue our journey. Alone in my room, I couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement at having met David. Our road trip was finally turning into the adventure I had hoped for. But as I flipped through the channels on Motel's ancient television, I stumbled upon a news report that sent chills down my spine. There had been a series of brutal murders occurring along the same road we were traveling. The killer was still at large, and the entire area was on edge. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling that settled in my chest, reminding myself that David was just a kind stranger who needed a ride. There was no reason to be afraid. As we continued our journey, I couldn't help but notice small inconsistencies in David's stories. The details seemed to shift, and sometimes he seemed to forget what he had told me earlier. It nagged at the back of my mind, but I tried to dismiss it as innocent forgetfulness. After all, he was just a traveler like me was an E. It was at a gas station where everything changed. As I went inside to grab some snacks and pay for the gas, I couldn't help but notice the newspaper on the counter. The front page displayed a chilling headline about the highway butcher, the serial killer responsible for the recent string of murders. My heart skipped a beat as I picked it up, scanning the article. There just below the headline was a police sketch of the killer. My blood ran cold as I realized the face staring back at me was hauntingly similar to David's. Panic surged through me, but I forced myself to remain calm. I had to find a way to contact the police without alluring David to my suspicions. Back on the road, I fumbled with my phone, trying to discreetly send a message to my friend back home, asking her to call the police on my behalf. As the minutes crawled by, I could feel David's gaze on me, and I sensed that he was growing suspicious of my behavior. My heart raced as I realized that he had become eerily quiet. The stories had ceased, and there was a tension in the air that I couldn't ignore. The next time we stopped at a small diner for a meal, I excused myself to the restroom and frantically called the police myself. I whispered into the phone, explaining my situation and begging them to help me. But when I returned to our booth, I found David sitting there with a sinister smile on his face. He had discovered my secret, and the look in his eyes told me that I was in grave danger. As we left the diner, he took my phone from me, crushing it under his boot. It was then that David confirmed my worst fears. He admitted that he was the highway butcher, and that I had unwittingly become his hostage. He forced me back into my car, demanding that I continue driving, with the terrifying knowledge that I was now at the mercy of a ruthless serial killer. The atmosphere inside the car was suffocating, thick with dread and fear. David's once charming smile now sent shivers down my spine. I could feel his eyes on me, watching my every move as I gripped the steering wheel. As we drove, David began to reveal his twisted motives behind the murders. He spoke of his disillusionment with society, his belief that he was cleansing the world of its darkest elements. He reveled in the power it gave him, the sense of control he felt over life and death. I knew that to have any chance of survival, I needed to manipulate David into letting his guard down. So I feigned empathy, nodding along with his ramblings, pretending to understand his twisted point of view. I hoped that by gaining his trust, I would have a chance to outsmart him and escape. When we stopped at another small-town diner for a meal, I saw a glimmer of hope. A local sheriff was sitting at the counter, sipping his coffee. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to devise a plan. As David was distracted by his meal, I slipped a hastily written note onto the counter, praying that the sheriff would notice it and understand my plight. Luck was on my side, and the sheriff saw the note. I could see the concern in his eyes as he read it, quickly excusing himself from the diner. My heart swelled with hope, knowing that help was on the way. It wasn't long before a manhunt was underway. The local authorities were mobilized, scoring the area for any sign of David and me. He seemed unaware of the pursuit, but I knew it was only a matter of time before he realized that we were being hunted. During a high-speed chase on a winding country road, I saw my opportunity to break free from David's grasp. I knew I had to act fast as my life hung in the balance. I summoned all my courage and slammed my foot down on the accelerator, the car lurching forward with a sudden burst of speed. "What the hell are you doing, Annalie?" David snarled, gripping the door handle tightly. I didn't answer, instead focusing on maintaining control of the car as I swerved around tight. My heart raced, adrenaline surging through my veins as I prepared to make my final move. In an act of sheer desperation, I jerked the wheel to the side, sending the car careening off the road and crashing into a tree. The impact was jarring and I felt pain shoot through my body, but I knew I had to keep going. Dazed and injured, I stumbled out of the wreckage, my vision blurry and my body aching. I knew that I had to keep moving as every second counted. David emerged from the car as well, his face twisted with rage and determination. "You won't get away from me, Emily," he screamed, giving chase as I began to run. My legs were weak and my breath came in ragged gasps, but I forced myself to keep going. I could hear David's footsteps behind me closing in, and I knew that I had to be clever if I wanted to survive this nightmare. I darted into a dense thicket of trees, hoping to confuse him and buy myself some time. As I ran deeper into the woods, I noticed a partially hidden cave, its entrance obscured by overgrown foliage. Esperant, I scrambled inside, praying that David wouldn't find me. As I crushed in the darkness, listening to the sound of his footsteps drawing nearer, I knew that I had to confront him. I couldn't keep running forever. I had to find a way to outsmart him and bring this nightmare to an end. When David finally entered the cave, his eyes wild and his breath heavy, I knew it was now or never. Summoning all my remaining strength, I lunged at him, catching him off guard. We grappled in the darkness, our struggle echoing off the cave walls. I could feel his grip tightening around my throat, the air leaking my lungs, but I refused to give in. In one last desperate attempt to overpower him, I managed to kick him in the knee, causing him to stumble and lose his grip on me. Gasping for breath, I seized a heavy rock that lay nearby and brought it crashing down on his head, knocking him unconscious. Exhausted and shaking, I stumbled out of the cave, finally free from David's clutches. The sound of sirens filled the air as the authorities arrived on the scene, alerted by the crash and the ensuing chase. They apprehended David, praising me for my resourcefulness and bravery. As I sat in the back of an ambulance, nursing my injuries, I couldn't help but feel a bittersweet sense of relief. I had survived my encounter with a highway butcher, but the experience had left me forever changed. I knew that I could never go back to the person I was before, the naive girl seeking adventure without understanding the darkness that could lurk around every corner. My road trip had taken an unexpected turn, and I knew that it was time for me to return. I needed to heal both physically and emotionally, and find a new path to self-discovery. One thing was for certain, though. I would never forget the harrowing journey that had pushed me to the very limits of my strength and resilience. Story 2. The day I moved into my new home, the sun was just beginning to set, casting a warm golden glow over the idyllic woodland clearing where the cabin stood. The cozy two-story structure was built from sturdy logs, their rich reddish-brown hue giving off an inviting aura. The tall, ancient trees surrounded the property like a protective embrace, their gnarled branches swaying gently in the breeze, and the ground was blanketed in a verdant layer of soft moss and fallen leaves. The air was alive with the sweet resinous scent of pine, mingled with the earthy aroma of damp soil after a recent rain. As I settled into my new life, I couldn't ignore the subtle sense of unease that seemed to seep into the very atmosphere of my home. There were moments when I'd be curled up in my living room, the only sound the soothing crackle and hiss of the fire, when a sudden icy chill would snake its way down my spine, leaving me with the unsettling sensation of being scrutinized by unseen eyes. You can stranger with a small, inexplicable disturbances I would find. A picture frame tilted at an odd angle, a vase moved from one side of the room to the other, or a book left open on a page I hadn't yet read. One sunny afternoon, I decided to explore the edge of the woods in search of some solace from the strange occurrences. The sunlight filtered through the dense canopy overhead, casting a mesmerizing pattern of light and shadow upon the forest floor. As I walked along the narrow winding path, my foot caught on something half buried in the damp earth. Crouching down, I gently brushed away the clean dirt to reveal an ancient crumbling journal. Its leather cover, once a rich, deep brown, was now worn and weathered, and the brass clasp that held it shut was tarnished and green with age. The pages within were fragile and yellowed, their edges curled and frayed, their ink faded but still legible. Curiosity piqued. I brought the journal back to my cabin, cradling it like a precious treasure. Settling into my favorite armchair, a plush high-backed seat positioned perfectly beside the window, I began to read the journal by the soft, diffused sunlight that streamed through the gauzy curtains. The author was a previous inhabitant of my very home, who had encountered the same eerie events as I. But their story took a far darker turn, chronicling the harrowing torment they suffered at the hands of a mysterious and malevolent creature that haunted the shadowy depths of the surrounding woods. The more I read the journal, the more engrossed I became in the previous inhabitant's chilling tale. Their words painted a vivid picture of sleepless nights spent huddled beneath the covers, listening to the haunting sounds that echoed through the cabin. The scratching of claws against wooden walls, the guttural growls that reverberated through the floorboards, and the malevolent whispers that seemed to drift through the air like tendrils of smoke. The journal revealed a sinister truth. The creature could only be seen in the reflection of a mirror or other reflective surfaces, its visage too horrifying to behold directly. My heart races as I read each passage, the unsealing sense of being watched growing stronger with each turn of the fragile yellowed page. I couldn't shake the feeling that the creature had taken notice of my presence and was now lurking in the shadows, stalking me just as it had the author of the journal. With a mixture of trepidation and determination, I decided to venture deeper into the woods, armed with a handheld mirror, hoping to catch a glimpse of the elusive being that seemed to be haunting my every waking moment. As I stepped further into the dense forest, the atmosphere grew heavier, the air thick with a musty scent of decay, and the eerie silence that seemed to swallow all sound. I clutched the mirror tightly, my heart pounding in my chest as I scanned the surroundings, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. It wasn't long before I spotted it, a brief flicker of movement in the mirror's reflection. A dark, twisted shape that seemed to ripple and distort the very air around it. Fear gripped me like a vice, but I forced myself to continue my exploration, like curiosity driving me forward despite the growing terror that clawed at the edges of my mind. Over the following days, the creature became bolder, appearing more frequently in the reflections of the mirrors and windows throughout my cabin. I would catch glimpses of it in the polished surface of the kettle as I boiled water for tea, or see its twisted shadow looming over me as I brushed my teeth. The creature left behind ominous signs of its presence. Deep gouged claw marks that marred the walls and furniture at a cloying putrid stench that clung to the air like a miasma. As the creature's manifestations grew more aggressive, I knew that I needed to find a way to put an end to the nightmare that was consuming my life. I became consumed by the pages of the journal, scoring them for any clue that might reveal the creature's origins or how to banish it back to the shadows from which it had emerged. It was then that I discovered the key to my salvation, an ancient ritual, long forgotten by time, that had the power to break the curse that had unleashed the creature upon my home. The ritual was dangerous, and the consequences of failure were dire, but I knew that I had no other choice but to confront the darkness that had taken hold of my life. The night I chose to perform the ritual, a fierce storm raged outside, the wind howling through the trees like the anguished cries of the damned. Rain lashed against the windows and thunder shook the very foundations of the cabin. The power flickered and died, plunging me into an abyssal darkness. broken only by the sporadic flash of lightning that illuminated the cabin in stark, ghostly light. I had spent days meticulously preparing for this moment, gathering the necessary components, and studying the ancient words scrawled in the journal's pages. As I lit a circle of candles in the center of the living room, their flickering flames casting eerie shadows on the walls, I could feel the creature's presence growing stronger, its malevolence palpable in the air. With my heart pounding in my ears, I began to recite the incantation, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. The words felt foreign on my tongue, their syllables twisting and writhing like serpents in my mouth. As I spoke, the temperature in the room plummeted, and I could see my breath condensing in the icy air. The candles flickered wildly, their flames dancing as if possessed by some unseen force. I could feel the creature's rage mounting with each word I uttered, its shadowy form now fully visible even without the aid of a mirror. It loomed before me, a nightmarish amalgamation of darkness and twisted limbs, its eyes two burning embers of pure hatred. The very air around it seemed to shudder with malice, as if reality itself was warping in its presence. My voice faltered, and for a moment I feared that I had made a grave mistake, that I had only succeeded in provoking the creature's wrath. But I knew I couldn't give in to my fear, not when I was so close to banishing the beast that had tormented me for so long. I forced myself to continue the ritual, a voice growing stronger and more resolute as I neared the end of the incantation. With a final desperate cry, I spoke the last words of the ritual, feeling the power of the ancient spell surge through me like a tidal wave. The creature's chilling scream filled the air, a sound that seemed to tear the very fabric of reality, as its twisted form began to disintegrate before my eyes, dissolving into wisps of darkness that were consumed by the flickering candlelight. As the creature's screams faded into echoes, a palpable silence settled over the cabin. The storm outside seemed to lose its fury in response to the banishment of the malevolent being. The weight that had been pressing down on me for weeks felt suddenly lifted, as if the very atmosphere of the cavern had been cleansed of the darkness that had once haunted it. Its candle's flames burned steady and strong now, casting a warm, comforting glow throughout the room. I slumped to the floor, my limbs trembling from the adrenaline that still coursed through my veins. Relief washed over me like a soothing balm, mingling with the last remnants of fear that clung to my mind. Over the next few days, I set about repairing the damage the creature had wrought upon my home. I scrubbed away the claw marks that marred the walls, and the putrid stench that had permeated the air gradually dissipated. As I worked, I could feel the lingering traces of the creature's presence slowly fading, replaced by a sense of peace and tranquility that I had not experienced since first moving into the cabin. I returned the ancient journal to its resting place at the edge of the woods, a silent tribute to the previous inhabitant who had suffered so greatly at the hands of the creature. I felt a connection to them, a bond forged through shared terror, and the knowledge that we had both faced an unimaginable darkness and emerged victorious. As the days turned into weeks, I began to reclaim my life, no longer tormented by the fear that had once consumed me. The cabin, once a place of nightmares, became a sanctuary where I could heal and grow, free from the shadow of the creature that had stalked me through the woods. I found solace in the beauty of the surrounding forest, its once threatening darkness now a reminder of the strength I had discovered within myself. In the months that followed, the memory of the creature and the terror it had brought into my life began to recede like the ebbing tide of a dark and tumultuous sea. The cabin, nestled within the embrace of the ancient woods, became my sanctuary, a place where I could truly find solace and solitude, far from the chaos of the city I had left behind. The once menacing shadows of the forest now held a different kind of magic for me. I began to explore the woods with a renewed sense of wonder, discovering the beauty and the delicate tracery of a spider's web glistening with dew, or the vibrant colors of the wildflowers that bloomed in the dappled sunlight beneath the trees. The sounds of the forest, once a source of dread, now sang to me like a symphony. The rustle of leaves, the gentle murmur of the wind, and the distant cries of birds soaring high above. Through my ordeal, I learned that the power of belief and the strength of the human spirit were forces to be reckoned with. I found within myself a resilience I never knew I possessed, a strength that had allowed me to confront the darkness and banish it from my life. I realized that I had not only faced my fears, but emerged from them a stronger, more complete person. As the seasons changed and the once dark woods transformed into a vibrant tapestry of color and life, I came to understand that my experiences had changed me irrevocably. I was no longer the same person who had first set foot in the cabin, afraid of the unknown and haunted by the shadows that lurked in the corners of my mind. I had faced the darkness, and in doing so I had found the light within myself. I knew that no matter what challenges life might throw my way, I had the power to overcome them, to stand tall and unyielding against the forces that sought to break me. And with each new day, as the sun rose above the treetops and bathed my little cabin in its warm golden light, I greeted the world with a newfound sense of hope, courage, and determination, ready to face whatever adventures lay ahead.